If you buy decaf coffee, the word on the front of the package does not tell you the whole story. Two coffees can both say decaf in big letters, yet the caffeine may have been removed in very different ways. I checked current manufacturer information for several familiar brands. One company surprised me because the method changes depending on whether you buy a bag, a coffee pod, or an espresso capsule. We will get to that one in a few minutes. Before we finish, I will also give you the quick shelf check I would actually use, because you should not need a notebook to buy a bag of decaf. First, let us start with Folgers. That red Folgers container has been sitting in American kitchens for generations. It is familiar, easy to find, and usually priced like an everyday coffee. The current United States page for Folgers Classic Decaf tells you about the roast and the coffee, but it does not clearly name the method used to remove the caffeine. Folgers information for Classic Decaf sold in Canada identifies ethyl acetate. I would not use information from another market to promise that every current container sold in the United States is processed exactly the same way. So if the method matters to you, check the package you are actually buying or ask Folgers directly. There is another small Folgers detail that shows why the exact product matters. The current United States pages for Classic Decaf coffee pods and Classic Decaf instant coffee describe those products as 99.7% caffeine-free. The standard ground Classic Decaf page I checked does not make that same percentage the center of its description. None of this changes the coffee in your cup. It simply shows how the information presented to shoppers can change from one format to another. For Folgers, that is as far as I would take the claim. Ethyl acetate sounds more intimidating than the basic idea. Picture caffeine as one guest you want to quietly escort out of a crowded room without sending everybody else home. Ethyl acetate acts as a solvent that helps separate caffeine from green coffee beans before roasting. You do not need to remember the chemistry. Just remember that ethyl acetate is one route to decaf. Water processing is another. Swiss water is a specific water process. Carbon dioxide can also be used. Methylene chloride is another method, permitted under current United States food rules. Different routes can lead to the same word on the front of the bag. And that word does not mean zero caffeine. The United States Food and Drug Administration says a typical 8 fluid-ounce cup of decaf coffee contains roughly 2 to 15 milligrams of caffeine. Compared with regular coffee, the amount is small, but it is not zero. For many people, that is exactly why decaf is useful. You keep the smell, the warm mug, and the familiar pause in the day, while taking in much less caffeine. Sleep is one reason people make the switch. A 2023 review combined 24 studies on caffeine and sleep. Across those studies, caffeine was associated with about 45 fewer minutes of total sleep on average, along with a longer time before falling asleep. That average is useful, but it is not a prediction for your night. The effect varies quite a bit from person to person. Most of us do not need a research paper to recognize that difference. One person can finish coffee after dinner and be asleep before the evening news is over. Another has a cup in the middle of the afternoon and is still getting acquainted with the ceiling fan at midnight. If that second person sounds familiar, a later cup of decaf is a simple experiment that does not require changing your whole routine. Starbucks was next. Starbucks explains several decaffeination methods on its consumer education pages. It discusses direct contact processing, the Swiss water process, and carbon dioxide processing. Then I looked at the current Decaf house blend product information. The page tells you the coffee is Arabica and gives you flavor and origin information. The exact decaffeination method for that specific product is not clearly identified there. That may not matter to you at all. If you already like Starbucks and simply want much less caffeine, you know the taste you are buying. The decaf version may be all the information you need. But if you walked into the store specifically looking for a water-processed coffee, the ordinary product page does not answer that question. There is an easy trap here. A company can have an excellent page explaining decaf in general, and that still does not tell you which method was used for the product in your hand. So I use a simple rule. If the company does not clearly tell me the method for the exact product, I leave the answer open. I do not fill the blank with a guess. Dunkin and Maxwell House led to much the same place, so there is no reason to drag you through the same explanation twice. Dunkin sells familiar decaf coffee for home brewing, but the standard product information I checked did not clearly identify the exact decaffeination method. Maxwell House gives shoppers a different detail. Its Decaf House Blend coffee pods are described as 99.7% caffeine-free. That sounds very specific, and it is useful if your question is how much caffeine was removed. It does not tell you how the caffeine was removed. Those two questions are easy to confuse. A percentage can describe caffeine reduction without telling you anything about the processing method. It also does not give you the exact number of milligrams in the mug you brew at home. The amount can vary with the coffee, the serving size, and the way it is prepared. The variation is one reason the United States Food and Drug Administration gives a range for decaf, instead of one number for every cup. So when you see 99.7% caffeine-free, read it for what it tells you. It tells you the caffeine has been greatly reduced. It does not turn the package into a complete map of the decaffeination process, and it does not promise that every mug contains the exact same amount of caffeine. So far we have familiar household names, where the front of the package tells you plenty about roast, flavor, or caffeine reduction, while the processing method can still be hard to pin down. Then I checked Peet's coffee. This was the surprise I mentioned at the beginning. Peet says its bagged decaf coffees and coffee pods use a water process. Its decaf espresso capsules do not. Peet says those use carbon dioxide. I would never have guessed that from the logo alone. Think about how normal the assumption would be. You buy Peet's decaf in a bag for years. Then one day you pick up espresso capsules carrying the same name. Most of us would assume the company handles all of its decaf in the same way. According to Peet's, it does not. The product format changes, and the decaffeination method changes with it. That one example is enough to show why broad lists about entire brands can be misleading. The exact product matters. Carbon dioxide processing sounds technical, but the shopping lesson is easier than the machinery. Green coffee beans are placed in a sealed system, where carbon dioxide under high pressure helps extract caffeine. The caffeine is separated, and the beans continue on to roasting. You can forget the equipment as soon as this video ends. What is worth remembering is that a bag and an espresso capsule with the same company name may not have the same processing story. Peet's also makes one other point that clears up a common source of confusion. Water processed does not automatically mean Swiss water. Swiss water is one specific process. Water processing is the larger category. Kicking Horse makes that distinction easy to see because the company clearly identifies the Swiss water process on its decaf product. This is a less familiar brand than Folgers or Maxwell House in some parts of the country, but the processing information is unusually easy to find. Kicking Horse says the Swiss water process removes 99.9% of the caffeine. You may also notice words such as organic and fair trade on the Kicking Horse page. Those can matter for other reasons, but they do not replace the process information. If you are trying to learn how the caffeine was removed, the words Swiss water process are the part that answers that particular question. I use the same habit with any package. Read the claim that answers the question you actually have, instead of letting every badge on the bag compete for your attention. The simple picture is this. Water helps move caffeine out of green coffee beans, and carbon filters capture the caffeine, while the process is managed to preserve the coffee compounds people want to keep. For a grocery trip, that is plenty of science. The important part is that you do not have to wonder which process the company is talking about. There is one thing the Swiss water label cannot tell you, though: whether you will like the coffee. Kicking Horse Decaf is a dark roast with deep roasted and chocolate-like flavors. Some people love that style. Somebody sitting across the breakfast table may take one sip and wonder whether a small campfire found its way into the coffee maker. Neither person is wrong. Taste still matters. So does price. Kicking Horse often costs more than an everyday supermarket canister. The clearly identified process may be worth the difference to you. If it is not, there is no medal for carrying the most expensive bag out of the store. A good decaf has to fit your budget and taste good in your own kitchen. Caribou Coffee gives us another option that is easier to verify. The current information for Caribou Blend Decaf identifies a natural water decaffeination process. Caribou has also said it has used water decaffeination for more than 15 years and often uses the Swiss water process. I would describe Caribou as a clear water processed option. I would not promise that every product from the company always uses the exact same named process unless the current information says so. For someone who prefers water processing, that is enough to put Caribou on the comparison list without turning the shopping trip into a research project. And this is where the difference between a useful label and a perfect label becomes important. I do not need a company to tell me every technical detail on the front of the bag. I do want it to answer the question I care about without making me search through 10 pages. Caribou does that reasonably well for a shopper looking for water processing. There is one specialty brand I will mention only briefly. Counterculture Slow Motion currently identifies the Swiss water process, unless otherwise noted. That final phrase is a useful reminder. Coffee products can change over time, especially specialty coffees that may use different lots during the year. Current information beats an old chart every time. Now we can answer the question that tends to make this whole subject sound much scarier than it needs to be. What about methylene chloride? Under current United States food regulations, methylene chloride can be used in coffee decaffeination. The federal rule sets the residue limit at 10 parts per million in decaffeinated roasted coffee and instant decaf coffee. There is also an active petition asking the United States Food and Drug Administration to remove authorization for methylene chloride and several other solvents from certain food uses. As of August 19, 2026, that petition is still under review. There is a lot more legal and toxicology detail behind that debate, but I do not think reading a federal rulebook to you would make this a better coffee video. So the situation today is simple. The current rule remains in place. Decaf coffee has not been broadly banned, and there is no general decaf recall because of this petition. Some shoppers are comfortable with the current federal standard. Others would rather choose a clearly identified water process or carbon dioxide process when that option is easy to find. You do not need to turn either choice into a frightening story. For me, the more useful discovery from checking these coffees was this. The word decaf answers only one part of the buying decision. It tells you that most of the caffeine has been removed. It may tell you very little about the route used to get there. Once you know that, the shelf becomes much easier to read. The good news is that you do not have to memorize the brands in this video. In fact, I would rather you did not. Products change. Packaging changes. A company can update a supplier or add a new format. A simple buying habit will age better than a list. The buying habit at the end matters more than memorizing who used what today. Let us say your main goal is simply cutting back on caffeine. In that case, I would start with a decaf version of a coffee you already enjoy. If Maxwell House has been sitting beside your coffee maker for 30 years, you do not suddenly need a specialty whole bean coffee because somebody on the internet used the words premium process. If you like Dunkin, start there. If Starbucks is the taste you prefer, there is nothing strange about choosing Starbucks decaf. Reducing caffeine does not have to turn coffee into a hobby. The processing method becomes more important when you personally care about how the caffeine was removed. Then I would give extra attention to products that make the answer easy to verify. Kicking Horse clearly names the Swiss water process. Caribou clearly identifies water decaffeination. Peet's clearly explains that its bagged decaf coffees and coffee pods use water processing, while its espresso capsules use carbon dioxide. Counterculture Slow Motion is another clearly identified Swiss water example, though it may be less common in a regular supermarket. Those are useful starting points because you do not have to guess. Notice what I am not saying. I am not telling you that every product with a less obvious process is dangerous. I am saying that when two coffees are sitting next to each other and processing matters to me, I prefer the one that gives me a clear answer. I see that as a buying preference, not a medical diagnosis. Flavor gets a vote too. A beautifully documented decaf can still be the wrong roast for you. If you usually enjoy a smooth medium roast and buy a very dark coffee, only because the processing label sounds impressive, breakfast may be disappointing. Try a smaller package when you are changing brands. If you love it, great. If you do not, the coffee aisle will still be there next week. There is another little detail worth checking if caffeine is the reason you chose decaf. Look at your mug. The United States Food and Drug Administration range of roughly 2 to 15 milligrams refers to an 8 fluid ounce cup. Many mugs in American kitchens are considerably larger than 8 fluid ounces. Some of them look fully prepared to serve soup. The caffeine in your actual drink can vary with the amount of coffee, the serving size, and the product itself. For someone who is extremely sensitive to caffeine, that can matter. For a person simply trying to cut back, decaf still represents a large reduction compared with regular coffee. This is where a simple mix of regular coffee and decaf across the day can make sense. Maybe the morning cup suits you perfectly. Keep it. If the later cup seems to follow you into bed, make that one decaf for a week and see how you feel. No grand declaration is required. There is no birthday when regular coffee suddenly becomes forbidden. People respond differently, and routines differ too. Anyone who has been given a specific caffeine limit by a doctor or pharmacist should follow that personal advice, since decaf still contains some caffeine. For ordinary grocery shopping, I would make the decision in about 30 seconds. Pick up the exact product you plan to buy, not just the brand. Peet's already showed us why that matters. Then ask whether the decaffeination method matters to you. This sounds obvious, but it saves a surprising amount of confusion. Many people start reading about decaf and suddenly feel as though they are supposed to care equally about every processing detail. You are not. Maybe your real problem is that regular coffee at 4 in the afternoon keeps you awake. In that case, caffeine reduction and a flavor you enjoy may matter much more than the name of the process. Maybe you simply prefer a clearly identified water process. Then the process wording deserves more attention. Neither shopping goal requires you to solve every question about coffee chemistry. If your main goal is simply much less caffeine, focus on a roast you enjoy, a price you are comfortable with, and a format that works with your coffee maker. If you specifically want water processing, Swiss water, or carbon dioxide processing, look for that information on the package or in current manufacturer information. When the answer is not clear, do not guess, and then stop researching. You should be able to finish this decision before the person behind you begins to wonder whether you are planning to move into the coffee aisle. Price is not a reliable shortcut either. An expensive bag is not automatically healthier. A familiar supermarket canister is not automatically inferior. Packaging can make almost anything look impressive under good lighting. Use the information that actually answers your question. For one morning, the question may be caffeine. Another day, it may be process. And at 7 in the morning, sometimes the most important question is simply whether the coffee tastes good. I can respect that one. After checking these products, here is where I land. If I specifically wanted a decaf with a clearly identified water-based process, I would begin comparing Kicking Horse Caribou and the bagged or pod decaf choices from Peet's. Kicking Horse makes Swiss water very easy to identify. Caribou clearly states water decaffeination. Peet's gives unusually useful information about how its method changes with product format. If I already loved Folgers, Starbucks, Dunkin, or Maxwell House, and my main goal was simply reducing caffeine, I would not throw away a coffee I enjoy, because another bag has a more impressive processing phrase on the front. I would just know what information I have and what I do not. I find that a calmer way to shop, and coffee should probably be one of the calmer parts of the day. Choosing decaf does not have to feel like giving something up. The smell from the coffee maker is still there, and so is that quiet cup at the kitchen table. Most of the caffeine can disappear without taking away the part of the routine you actually enjoy. So my final advice is simple. Do not choose decaf because a frightening headline made you nervous. Look at the exact product. Decide how much the processing method matters to you. Then buy something that fits your taste, your budget, and the way you really make coffee at home. I am curious, what is sitting in your kitchen right now? Which decaf coffee do you drink? Take a look at the package and tell us the brand in the comments. If the decaffeination method is clearly listed, include that too. I think the answers will be very different from one kitchen to another. If this video made the coffee aisle a little easier to understand, subscribe to Tips for Seniors. You will see 2 coffee videos on the screen now. One compares regular coffee with decaf after 60. The other looks at everyday coffee choices that may help you find a better fit for your routine. Pick whichever one sounds more useful, and I will meet you there. Enjoy your coffee and have a wonderful day.